Hi people, it's Danny here. Hope you're doing good and welcome to the Native Instruments Arcus Showcase. Well, it's going to feel that way when you take a look at this. I've got a new album out and it's called Night Tales, and it's a selection of tracks. It starts off with a deep house kind of vibe, but then evolves into something a bit different and ends on this rather epic kind of cinematic breaks and all manner of different sounds thrown into the mix kind of track. But there is very much a key to this, and it is the Native Instruments Arcus instrument, which has an incredible sound, particularly the patch that I've used here. So we're going to start off with the very beginning, and it's a sound that comes in very early. So let's take a look. The track is called Beaten Heart. So there's this heartbeat that's pulsing away there, and that's an analog kick. But you can hear the Arcus instrument coming up now. There's a lot of automation occurring in this song. We're going to take a look. Just going to open up a couple of these groups so you can see the filter modulation here using one of the Arturia filters, the Filter Mini. So let's take a look at this instrument. I've got to say, I was absolutely blown away by this. This is part of the Complete 14 collection. I hadn't seen it before, and I'm going to bring the instrument up now. It's got a very impressive interface, very dramatic, and for some reason my screen is glitching a bit here. I wasn't prepared for that, but let me see if we can get this working. There we go. I've had some issues with my graphics. It's nothing to do with the actual software. So anyway, so this here is the interface, and the patch that I'm using is called Accelerating Particles. Okay, now this thing comes alive when you use the modulation wheel. So I was using the Native Instruments S61 controller to do so, and it really brought it alive. I do have a separate video where I am doing the prelude, which is a section before this, and I'm doing that live on the fly. I will share that so people can see that, but we're doing a deconstruction at the moment. So this instrument, let's take a look. Here are the actual MIDI notes that I played in. So there's an arpeggiation that was hand played, and this is playing this instrument, the Arcus. So we're going to solo and have a listen. But let's bring up this instrument. It's running through a few processes here. And in this part of the song, I used it with the modulation fully open. So the kind of texture that you're hearing is a combination of layers. So use that modulation wheel to switch between those layers. There is really something magical about this. And of course, the notes that I'm playing do contribute to that vibe, you know, for sure. But that texture is unreal. And so let's just bring this on. I call it the space harp. Here is something else that comes in. So it's the same notes in the chord, but played as a straight chord instead of them being arpeggiated. So let's listen. Now, I don't know if you're into your soundtracks, but I really am. And there was the Thomas Crown Affair, which was the original one with Steve McQueen, which was the Michael Legrand soundtrack. There was a scene, it's the chess scene. There's something incredibly atmospheric about some of the string work going on there. It was almost kind of like a very, very similar, kind of harp-like and plucky and all kinds of really exotic textures in the background. This very much reminded me of that kind of a sound. So it's got that kind of flavor for me. Let's take a look. Layering these together. And yes, it sounds kind of messy, but actually, I love how that sounds. And the other thing that I'm doing here is I'm running all of this through a group, and there is an effect over here on the left hand side which will come alive fairly soon, but at the moment it's not being used. Let's take a look at some of the other elements in this group. So we're going to move it forward. So there's a high string here. Another instance of the same instrument, but this is a couple of octaves up, so it's not cluttering everything. Another instrument here. And once again, Arkhis, I told you this was going to be a bit of a showcase for this instrument. This is called Alien Communication. It's very flute-like. I tell you what, let's solo that, right? So let's come into flute-like. There we go. Love that sound. And then the high string, let's come back. There we go. And that's incredible. When I played the prelude, I started off with that really high note, and it's creating this tension and drama, and it's a wicked sound. Just love that. So anyway, this is all building up, right? So what's going on in the background is it's building up to this point where there's like a breakbeat. And okay, we can't see that at the moment, so I'm just going to bring this down. I'm going to expose out these breaks. Here we go. So this is a very unconventional track for me. Most people associate with me with house music, and there is a housey kind of texture in here in the middle, but it's got these down-tempo slowed breaks, and it's very atmospheric. And when I was composing this track, what happened is that it was mainly housey, but then a small amount of breaks. I played it to my daughter, and she just loved the break section. So what I did is I flipped it around. So most of this has got that kind of break flavor, and there's a small kind of interlude in the middle where it's got the housey kind of texture. We'll see that soon. So anyway, enough talking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play this, and you can hear what happens, right? So we've had the Arcus instrument, it's building up, and the beats come in. Here we go. So there were two break beats that were slowed down. So they were half tempo and using the time stretch to create that nice kind of granular texture. An 808 kick to provide the boom, and then also a sub bass underpinning that too. But here's the housey bit. Let me take this away. And this is kind of mind-blowing. When this happened, I was kind of blown away. So there's definitely some magic here. Now, let me just show you something. This Arcus riff is continuing to play in that arpeggiated form. What also is happening in this section is that there is a new set of beats. It's a separate drum kit, which is a bunch of wave alchemy sounds. There's some real impressive heftiness to the kick here. So that you can see here these wave alchemy sounds that I programmed that beat for. But the really interesting aspect of this is that pulsing element, the movement, the motion that's occurring. Because I've not changed the notes here. These are the same notes as before. Although they're on a repeating cycle, it's not going through the full kind of chord progression. These are all running through an effect called Stutter Edit. And this is quite an old plugin, which is used for some kind of experimental effects and chaining together modulation effects and so on. And this is triggered off the MIDI keyboard. So it's flipping between presets using a MIDI track underneath, right? And that's here. You can see here the affected music track. This is transmitting through to the Stutter Edit plugin. So this track here is being used to flip between the different presets. And so have a listen. So normal. Now that MIDI note engages the effect. So it's the first preset. Goes to the next preset, back to the original. And let's bring up the effect so we can see that switching. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to go back here. I just had a knock at the door, so I just want to make sure you're seeing this. All right, let's go back on that again. Here we go. So you get a picture. The beauty of this particular effect is the fact that it switches the presets instantly. So it's got that performance aspect to it. Now you could hear that there is an additional sound coming in. There's some tension coming from this high string. I'm going to bring this up so that we can see this. And there we go. Once again, it's the Arcus. It's the same patch, but it's played up a couple of octaves. The other thing that I've got going on here is that I felt I wanted to get a bit of a kind of Blade Runner-esque kind of vibe. So I introduced a DX, a digital FM sound. This is coming from the Arturia DX7 and it's called Chamber. And you can see that coming in. Let me highlight this. Pitch bend on there. So you see what I mean about the Blade Runner reference, you know. So in Blade Runner, the original soundtrack from Vangelis, you had these kind of pitch falls. And in fact, there were nods to that soundtrack in the Hans Zimmer work on the more modern Blade Runner soundtrack as well. So this is coming out of that houseier section, which is a contrast, back into the original kind of arpeggiated Arkhis sound. And now it's also introducing some orchestral elements, which we'll take a look at. So we'll come out of this section into that now. Okay, I'm going to backtrack a bit here because it's done the same thing, so ignore this. It's to do with my monitor. I'm not sure what's happening. If I drag this slowly, we might be fine. Yes, we are. Now, this is using one of the instruments from the brand new Contact 7 Factory Library 2. There's some amazing orchestral instruments here that are in the collection. So these are cellos, and what I've done here is I've got the dynamics up at max. So if you do have a modulation wheel on your keyboard, that's pushing that all the way up. For me, it was the energy that I wanted, and sometimes I'm using that gradually, so I'll increase the energy when I'm playing the notes. But in this case, I just had them full on. And let's listen to these. Let's in fact just put all those musical elements on again. Let's have a listen to the cellos with the other elements together. And here what I was going for is that kind of James Bond, John Barry kind of vibe. I was a huge fan of those original soundtracks. And you know, one of the things that I've said about this album is that it's pulling together lots of my influences from the past in terms of all the music that I've listened to over the years. So that John Barry was a composer who had a very particular sound melodically. So this, for me, feels very reminiscent of that world. So in a way, it's kind of like a Bond soundtrack to me. So we're ending towards a crescendo, everything building up, and then we get a kind of calmer end, and I'm going to show you something about that. That for me is the most beautiful ending that I could have done. And it's not through what I've done so much, it's actually because of this effect. So you can see on the automation, I've got a mix gradually increasing throughout the end of those sustained notes. And this is feeding the dry wet balance of the Realm plugin. Realm, I'm not sure how you're supposed to say this, but for me, I call it Realm. But this is for me the best reverb that exists, right? I've been using it all the time since getting hold of it. I don't think I featured it on a video, but for me, this is an absolute go-to now. I just love the sound of this. And you can see what I've done here. I've got a long decay, it's 18 seconds. So at that point, what's happening is the dry wet mix that you have centrally here is being increased. So let's go back onto that now. Let's come back to the beginning of the sustained notes, and then you'll see it. The decay on that is unreal. And I've used this on a number of other tracks on the album as well, so you will hear it. And when it comes to doing a deconstruction on one of those other tracks, I will explain how I've used it. But the real key to this track is the Arcus instrument, which is from Native Instruments. And for me, it's an incredible instrument for creating soundtracks. And this track is very soundtrack-like. It's deliberately so. It's at the end of the album. It's the last track. And it's kind of a conclusion to the story that ends up, kind of tragically, really. But I feel that this track embodies that kind of aspect. It's not a happy song. It's not a happy tune. It's just epic and dramatic. And, I just love it. So anyway, that's the deconstruction. So there will be some others over the next couple of weeks. I wanted to kick off with this because it was a little bit different. But the album is available now on all the platforms. Night Tales is 16 tracks, and there are some interludes, different styles, including R&B and dub reggae and so on. But the extended versions, which are all of the kind of the housey ones, they're all exclusively available on TrackSource.